says, I believe in love. And there is Kwon Ye-sun, who is actually in 2008 won the Literature Prize for short story. And she expresses her life in this manner. Listen to this. Like an actor playing in an inappropriate role, I couldn't get off the stage, or even though it was very obvious I wasn't going to be able to do it well. It describes it so well. Doesn't it seem like our hearts? You know, it's like any play, you can just cut and just kind of get off the stage. However, for life, you can't get off the stage, even if you don't like it. And the one time that you're on this stage, it doesn't end until we die. And even though it's not a place that we think we belong, but the place that we have to stay, that is life. And it is not the things that we do very well either, but we have to stay there. Sometimes we're in crying, sometimes we have regrets, but in life we do have to go on. But you know what's amazing about this? But those places, in the places that those things that we don't want to do, in the places that we shouldn't be in the places that we couldn't even anticipate, we go through and we do amazing things. And some people say that we have God's grace. It's like Joseph and Jacob's life. It wasn't the thing that they thought they could do well, but they continually stayed there. But in the two lives, God had an amazing historical fact. Even the things that we look at is an amazing work. Paul refused. He did not want to go as a prisoner to Rome until the end. He thought it wasn't right for him. He just never felt, he was never a prisoner before. And you know, he was in prison before, but he wasn't his thing at all. And he always felt that this wasn't something that he had to bear. And the fact that he was in the prisoner stage in life, he thought he couldn't play that role very well. But God's thought was completely different. But God wanted to send Paul as a prisoner, and that was directly. So God was leading Paul that way, not in a free person, but as a prisoner. God decided to do that. Look at verse 1, and this shows it. And when it was decided that we should sail for Italy, they delivered Paul to some other prisoners, to a centurion of Augustan consort named Julius. And now he is, as a prisoner, he's moving along. This is not a regular passenger ship or regular movement at all. And this is actually in the covering and the service and the prison guard of the centurion. And we see that God's hand working here as well. And this is not a regular ship that he's on to go to Rome. And this was actually 24 hours that he is observed and protected. And so the possibility of Paul getting killed or ambushed by these 40 secret sects that wanted to kill Paul was now an impossibility. And so it looks like a prisoner, but God has maintained and made sure his security was perfectly covered. This is the work of God. And as he was riding the boat and as he was in the ship, we have to really explain. There's so many details in here. We need to make sure that we explain this in detail. So let me show you the map here. And the reason why I'm doing it here, the left side, it said that the broadcast doesn't come out, so I'm just doing it this way, okay? Now, Paul, when he got on his boat, he rowed his first ship in Caesarea. And as he was going on the boat, and he's actually going to not Rome directly, and actually it goes to a short distance, and it goes to actually Asia. And it's Adramyttium. It's Adramyttium. And this is in verse 2. And embarking on a ship of Adramyttium, which was about to sail to export along the coast of Asia, we put to sea, accompanied by Aristobulus, a Macedonian from Thessalonica. And it's hard to explain. It's Adramyttium. And this is actually not a normal big boat. This is a small boat. And this is not a large boat, a small boat. So if we look at this, is more of a domestic type of, it's like kind of like a bus, or if we want to talk about a plane, it's a domestic flight, okay? So on the people that was with him, and actually going from Caesarea, they went to Sidon, and they went to Cyrus, they passed Cyrus, and they went to number 3, it's Lycia. That's where they would arrive on the first trip. And that's where they would actually exchange into a larger ship or larger boat to go across the Mediterranean and go into actually towards Rome. This is in verse 6. There our centurion found a ship of Alexandria sailing for Italy, but put us on board. And this is Italy is Rome, actually. And so for Paul's boat that he's riding, this Alexandria sailing for Italy, this is actually a cargo ship. And most of these cargo ships and Roman at the time, they took 150,000 tons of grain from Egypt all the way, or wheat actually, to Rome. And they actually took a boat and then did that. And annually, they moved 150,000 tons annually. So there must have been many big boats that kind of carried this, right? And we always look at these cargo ships, and these are associated with the government of Rome. And this is actually a moving of these things through these boats are owned by the government. And so that there are actually, since it's owned by the government, so it can put all the cargo and all the prisoners or all the other part. And so the centurion, and as he comes in, who becomes the captain? It becomes the captain, the centurion. You know why? Because this is an association with the Rome. And so as soon as the centurion arrived, his authority to manage the ship goes to the centurion. And Paul, as he was riding the big boat, and there's many difficulties on his way to Rome. This is in 7 and 8. And it says, we sailed slowly for a number of days and arrived with difficulty to Saidas. And the wind did not allow us to go any further. We sailed under the sea of Crete off the Samon. And coasting along with difficulty, we came to a place called Fair Haven. And this is not a place, there's no engines on these ships or these boats. And so they have to rely on completely wind and sail. And so the fact that it was an opposing wind, it was like a northern wind, it was really hard to sail through there. And so they were actually going to this place here in Sindus here. And they moved to Sindus and they went to Salamon here, Salamon, right? In this area. And this is actually where they went, and they barely made it to that place because it was winds that was blowing from the north or the east, and so they made a really difficult departure. And this is not always the case. It's actually seasonal. And if it was that, how would they move all this cargo? It's usually in the winter, and the wind that comes from the north and the heavy winds makes it very difficult. And so the Roman Empire actually stopped sail in the wintertime, especially from November to about January, about 3 months, I think. And I think it's usually about from 3 months from November to January. I think that's 2 to 3 months they stopped sail there because of the storms. And look at verse 9. It says this, with much lead time passed, and the voyage was now dangerous because even the fast was already over, Paul advised them. And this fast, you know what this is? And this is actually the moment of, and actually this is the feasting or the fast, and it's the fast of the atonement, and it actually ends on about October 10th. And actually the October 10th, it's the Feast of the Tabernacle that begins. So that means that this fasting was ending. So it was actually after October 10th. So it was close to November of this time period. So this is important for us to understand the season. And so it was close to this mark where no one was going to sail that November. So nobody stops at a certain date, and no winter just all of a sudden stops at a certain date, or the storm bears up at a certain day. So it could change. So this is kind of in that borderline situation. And so Paul actually speaks to them, and he says, don't do this. We need to stop right here because this is what the verse 10 is saying. It says, sirs, I perceive that the voyage will be with injury, with much loss, not only the cargo, but the ship, but also our lives. And Paul, he went so many missionary journeys. He was on many ships and many boats, and he knows and experienced the dangers of the winter tides at that time. He actually had 3 cargo shipwrecks, and he had this place. He was actually on the waters before he was rescued. He had that experience. And I am sure that God has given him the heart to say that you must stop here as well. And so the ship captain, the centurion, they paid more attention to the others. We have to look at verse 12. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out to sea. There's a chance somehow to reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete. And so what does this mean? When you look at this picture again? So they're right there in Syria, and so that's not a good place to spend the winter. So they want to go to Phoenix. It's very close by the map. And so they have to spend almost 3 months somewhere. So they want to go somewhere that's a little bit more comfortable for them to stay over there. And Phoenix must have been a better place or a more comfortable place at that time. So once that they anchored there, they couldn't do 3 months. They have to stay there and be uncomfortable. And that's why where they were in Crete, off of Lystra, wasn't a good place. So they want to go to a larger place. So where they have a better place for sleeping accommodations, where they have better places for eating, and so they can spend 3 months. And so who made this decision? It was actually the centurion. And centurion paid more attention to the pilot and the owners, and that was more than Paul. So this is what the centurion paid more attention. This is what it means. And this decision, we need to understand the process and way that they made the decision. The centurion was taking the prisoners, and as soon as they came on the ship in Alexandria, he became the owner. The first was the centurion. The second was the pilot. The third is actually the boat owner. And it was actually sometimes considered to be the one that kind of led the ship. And the last is Paul. And these 4 people actually represents every power in the world at this time. They're representative of that. And even today, there's this 4 types of powers in the world. What's the centurion? It's the political power. And what is the pilot? It is actually the expert. He has the expertise. He's an expert. And what's the pilot? What's the owner? He has the economical power. And what's Paul? He has the spiritual power. And this is God's power that God has given him. And so in the world, there is always these 3 or 4 powers, always. And what's important in really important decision? So the centurion believes these 2 more than Paul. When it was a deep decision or an important decision, the spiritual decision always gets pushed away. And this is important because the world is the same way. When you have money, power, and knowledge, the spiritual life always gets pushed to the side. And the will of the Lord is pushed to the side. Look at what happened to the COVID-19 series. The expert comes out, talks about the political, economical situation. It talks about it that way. It doesn't talk about a spiritual way. It doesn't say that God is going to do this. Nobody listens to the word of God at that time. They always push that away. And then sometimes this is kind of a thing that happens all the time. He's not a economical person. He's not a ship captain. He doesn't have any economical power. But however, the real expertise and the decision, isn't this the right decision, is what we're saying. But the problem is this, is the power, money, political, and this 3 thing always or never always goes to the right place. And when you look at the money, expertise, and the political power, there's only contamination that could happen. That happens all the time. Do you know why? Because that people who use that have a sinful nature. Those who have money, those who have power, those who have knowledge and expertise, they always have a contamination of this sinful nature. And regardless of how kind or how good, when it comes in the hands of the greed and the evilness of it contaminates that world. When you look at the creation, God's created many things. There's one creation that has a problem. It's the human being. And God loved the person. God loved the man the most. However, it's not the trees, it's not the plants. Just give them water and the sun. They grow very, very well. And if you look at the streaming water, they don't deny that. They say that wise dogs are so well because they're so loyal to the owner. They don't betray the owner. And that is why so many people, only the human being has rebelled against God. You know why? Because they have a contaminant, sinful nature within them. They have the evil nature within their heart. And in the center, they have all the things that they only create problems. And what they request is this. And this is the sinful nature of man. And knowledge and power, money, all those things are really good. However, what they emphasize, it is actually the emphasis of the human nature. Someone who has money, they always try to move with money the power. And that is why the money and the power becomes contaminated. And the expertise and money and the power, they always get contaminated. The experts they always change their position through those things. And that's why there's continual revolving action of contaminations within these type of, and there's no perfect knowledge. There's no perfect money or power in this world. And that is why when the centurion and the pilot was actually doing this, it was already contaminated. What was the most important? It wasn't the safety, but we have to look at verse 12 here. And because the harbor was not suitable to spend the winter in, the majority decided to put out from sea there on a chance that somehow they could reach Phoenix, a harbor of Crete, facing both southwest and northwest, spending the winter there. And so the reason is this. Because it's not a place where they want to stay. It's a difficult place. It's not a good place for them. So 3 months, they have to rest there. It wasn't a good place where they can rest. And so for 3 months, it's not a place where they can rest and they can eat, and it's not a good place. This is a rural area for some reason. And what did they say? And so in Phoenix, they want to spend, there was more people that wanted to spend there. So it was actually their request. It was the majority requesting. And so what's important here? It is not the safety here at all. What the centurion and the pilot, that's not what they're decisioning. Regardless of that they go above all that, and they go for comfort. They go for a better place where they can spend the winter. And this is the human nature that they have. And that's the decision that they've made. And so it was always about the power. It's not about the safety. It was using all the power and the political power. And this is the image of the world today as well. And so in the expertise, when they talk about the political things, they say, who really exerts their expertise in the world? It always the influence of the political nature, the money nature, the economical nature, and they don't really work for the people. When you look at the details inside, there's always hidden agendas within them. And when you look at the spiritualness of the world, they totally deny them and they depart from them. Let's look at verse 13. And now in the south wind blew gently, supposing that they had attained their purpose by weighing anchor and sailing along Crete, close to the shore. So this picture here, so as they left here, and they were supposed to follow the road there, or to follow closer to shore. It doesn't look that far, but it is actually still far. And from the southern side, there has to be a gentle wind from the south to go there safely. And it has to be a gentle wind to go there. So this is the northern side, and this is the southern side, and this is the northern side. And so from the southern side, there has to be a light breeze in order for them to travel safely. And what does it say here? It says, now, when the south wind blew gently, it says. Isn't that amazing? That the wind blew gently, so they can go safely. And so when they were departing there, it was blowing lightly. And so they were going well. And so it was a good thing for them, right? So, and all of a sudden, all these things, their plans are actually went away when they were going gently. But soon a tempestuous or tempest came up, a nor'easter wind came and struck them from the land. Let's look at verse 13. This is verse 14. But soon a tempestuous wind called nor'easter struck down from the land. And so as they're going and following the land there, and then actually from the nor'easter, so what happens to the ship? It gets pushed to the south. And it gets continually to the south. They can't be on the shoreline that any longer. And so it's a dangerous place. And the reason fact that they had lifted up the anchor, it means that there's a bunch of sand barges there that they could have landed ashore. And so, and basically, they actually threw all their sails down, and they were actually letting the wind blow them. That's the situation. And this verse 15 says this in describing that. And when the ship was caught and could not face the wind, we gave away, and it was driving alone. They couldn't drive it. They couldn't guide the ship. And so they were just kind of being forced by the winds and the waves. And when you look at, and they can do all these things, but in the second day, they actually start putting aboard all the cargo that they had. And when you look at verse 19, and it says, on the third day, they threw the ship's tackle overboard with their own hands. And so these are the tools that can actually repair the boats. They even threw that overboard. You know what this means? That they could not control the ship anymore. They've totally given up on the port. They don't need a pilot anymore. There's nothing that they can do. That when you look at, we didn't read this in 38, in that ship, and all the cargo, that was also thrown out as well. So the economical reasons were all thrown out as well. And so what does this mean? That actually, because of the nor'easter, the power of the political power ended. The expert power ended. The economical power also entered it. And all the people who had the confidence in the expert, they didn't have anything. The economical power was completely gone. What they have to do? What did they have to do? Rely on? And the political power and the centurion and his governor, he had nothing left to do. And those dangers all went away. And you know what people do? Where do they have the confidence? So when they have money on their own. And so when I do it, they're going to listen to me because I have this power. That's the confidence. What about power and the politicalness? When they can't use that political, they have no power at all. No power of money. When they have no money, they have no authority. What power do they have? So that person is a great person. Long ago, they were a great place, but now he's nothing. Who was listening to him now? He has no money, he has no power. My beloved. But in the world, all the things may disappear. But God's power, it is actually Paul that has the authority. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't have the money. He doesn't have the expertise. He's actually a prisoner. And from that time, his authorities stands up. In the places where it's completely broken, where he was being pushed around, and from that standpoint, Paul's authority started to rise up. You know why? Because it's not his power. It is not people given. It is actually not earned. It is actually given by God. And when the world, all the things, when everything goes away, there's one thing that doesn't go away. It is the authority that's given by God. The things that God is not money, it's not power that protects, it's the power of God that protects us. It is the God that's being with us, and God's help that is always with us, and regardless of what it is, does not fail us. And we'll see this next week. And what we have to see here is this. And it is not what we are relying on right now. What are we relying on right now? What are the things that we have confidence in right now? Is it really because of God? Is it money? And is it the knowledge that you have? Or certain powers that you have? Do you have the pride in that? And do you have the confidence in that? And as soon as that goes away, that is it. And some people actually can rule over that for the entire life. But when we stand before God, all these things disappear. When we stand before God, there's nothing left anymore. And what we have to do is this. Where is I? Where am I standing? What do I have the confidence in? And what do I say? Is it money? Then from that point, there's nothing more agonizing than that. Is it someone that you're relying on? There's nothing more agonizing than that. But in your life, in your authority, in your confidence, ye evidence, I hope that becomes God. And in the Bible, and continuously, this is what Bible continually, from Exodus, from Deuteronomy, from all the Bible texts, this is what it shows us, tries to teach us. Don't rely on the power nations. Don't rely on the people and the kings. And for thousands of years, God is continually teaching his people this way. But the people continually try to rely on those things. And this is an amazing event. It continually, and God speaks so many times, and it shows him many, many times and over. But people continually repeats this process. They rely more on people. They rely more on nations. And so what we have to look at this is very important. And so how do we interpret this? And what the Bible word takes us doing today in our lives and the things that's happening in our fight, in a spiritual fight, is exactly shown as an example here. The money and the power that we have. And I hope that when you're using it for your own nature, and there's many events that happens that way. And for Paul, just as Paul's actually answers were pushed away, it is actually within ourselves, and it continually gets pushed away. And the will of God continually gets pushed away in our hearts. And so, and how can Paul stand this way? You and I are living a life just very similarly. It is the knowledge of that's given from God. It is actually the power that's given from God. And because of that, you push God away. And this is our image, and this is the reality of today. And the way that we can protect ourselves in our life, we have to be within God's hands. But when we think about money and the knowledge and the power that we have, if you rely on this, then we don't see the hand of God. We don't see the workings of God. And that we can actually push this away. You know why? Because we feel we have money, we have knowledge, and then we have the power to do that. So we think we can push this away. And we don't seriously look at the spiritual side of our lives. However, when you ignore God's spirituals, we see life's storms that comes to us. And the reason why God gives storms for us in our lives, it is not to give us failure. It is actually to break ourselves to see the right hand of God. And so you're thinking incorrectly. And where are you going? You're not going the right way. You need to look at this correctly. And if you go in the boat and you're in a small place, people get proud. And when the ship kind of runs away, everybody starts to realize what happened. What about when you're riding a plane, when there's a great turbulence, then you says, I'm going to have to pay attention here, right? And that is why God gives people storms, is so that nobody can do that. You can say, I can't live this way, and they come back. And then when you meet the storm, you see the Lord. And when you see the storm, then you see how futile the things that you're holding on to. And for even the things that in the night before, you could say, I had the money, I had the power. And you say, that's okay. But if you're saying, if you face death, all these things are futile. They don't matter. It doesn't matter. Nobody even taught you this lesson. But naturally, you learn that lesson, don't you? And when you look at Psalms 119, 67 and verse 71, it says this, and this is what David says, before I was afflicted, I went astray, but now I keep your word. It is good for me that I was afflicted, that I might learn your statutes. And for David, he's saying that if I wasn't afflicted, I couldn't really understand and keep your word. That's what he's saying. And that is why this affliction is a blessing. The storms are not judgments, but they are a blessing. And because we makes us realize it. But as in a life, when you're part of this storm, it's really hard to follow God's word. It's not that you don't know God's will. None of the things come to your attention. You know why? When you are in the very peaceful and when you're in a good state, what's natural, it is not, you don't have this attention to pay God's will. And this blissful thing and the peaceful thing, you're saying, God has given me this blessing, that I want to follow God's blessing a little more, but we don't do that. But what people do in the most peaceful state of their lives, what's naturally that's coming out, they always look at their self and they continue to want to have this greed comes out. This is natural for them. And this is why Romans 7:18-19, Paul says this, "For now that nothing good dwells in me, that is, in my flesh, for I have the desires to do what is right, but not in the ability to carry it out. For I do not do the good that I want, but the evil I do want is what I keep on doing." He says, I want to do some good, but I want to do the will of God. It is not it. I just want to do what's right for me. And Paul's saying this too. Paul's saying this. He says he wants to do the word of God, and the things are good, and these are the things, I'm seeing this. I want to do evil. That's what he says. And this is Paul that's always done this. And in fact, he was always testified about Christ. And he's always talking about Jesus. He's saying that we cannot do anything without Jesus. We can't do anything without the grace of the cross. We can't do anything without recognizing the word of God. Regardless of what somebody else says next to me, it doesn't break this in. Until we recognize the grace of the cross, we don't stop that. And that is why what we need and the storms that we face, and it is not the most dangerous. It is actually the danger is when we get a gentle wind, when things are going well. Because we don't pray that much during that time. All the prayer topics go away. When something's nice and it's gentle wind blows in our lives, we're okay. We always cut everything off, and all the dangers and all the senses seems to disappear. And this is what Paul, he doesn't have this. He's always prayed. Paul's always come before the Lord. However, he was always a word person. And you know what? As soon as he sees this, everything breaks away. And Lord, I'm going to go here. And Lord, I'm going to do this. And he's always asked, this David. And actually, when he sins before Bathsheba, all these senses went away. He knew she was married. And there's nothing here. It doesn't make any sense. And many people said that he still goes because his spiritual senses totally died. And you know when he did this? Is when he slept all day and he woke up in the evening. Did you know that they gave 3 sacrifices, morning and evening? And did you know the army was fighting somewhere in the battlefield somewhere else? He was alone and in his place, in his palace, and he was broken. And in fact, in the morning to the evening sacrifices, that means that he never went there. He didn't pray. That means that he always broken there. And it was his gentle, peaceful places. The spiritualness is always broken. And this is the most dangerous. And when do we really have to pray? It is when there's nothing, no issues, when things are going well. And when it's difficult, some people, you can block them, don't pray, they pray. And it said, don't seek God, they seek God. And it said, don't seek God diligently, they seek God anyway. Some people say this. And so can you just pray and say, it is not my style. I'm just quiet. I am a sly meditation person. And they say this. And you can't say that. And that person, when there's an issue with their parents, what do? They come to the church and they start screaming, "Oh Lord, help me, Lord." They said, "Please be quiet." They start screaming away. And when their life has an issue, their style, where's the style anyway? They sincerely seek the Lord. My beloved, when there's an issue, or what's not the issue is when you don't have the issue in your life, when there's a gentle breeze in your life, you need to seek God diligently. When the issues of life comes to you, and those people who don't seek God are the worst. And all the issues are blown up if you're not begging for God. That's so powerful. And so, you know what's even worse than that? Is that some people say, I don't have anything to pray about. That person is more agonizing. For Paul, in his peaceful state, that he had the most. Look at 1 Corinthians 9:27. But I discipline my body to keep it under control, lest after preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. And this is where it is. This is when Paul was doing the best. And this is the third missionary journey. And all the miracles happening the most. One word, all the miracles started to happen. At this place, he says that that, Lord, I want to seek you so I don't get disqualified. He says, I discipline my body to keep it under control. He says he keeps it under control. And it says, at least preaching to others, I myself should be disqualified. I don't want to get disqualified. That's what he's saying. And so that he looks holy and looks like he's saving so many people, but your life is all messed up. There's many incidences that do happen. That is why Paul knew this. And that's why he always thought, and he says he disciplined himself. If we met a storm in our lives, I hope that you seek God. But if you're in a gentle wind, I hope that you seek God all the more diligently. This is the way we could have victory. It is when we're in difficulty in praying, that's something that happens naturally. But in the places where we're going very well, we should always pray without ceasing. Yes, we need to pray, and there's a storm. When there's something doing very well, we need to continually pray, even harder in the state that we are doing well. And you know what's difficulty? When we are doing well, when we rely on God, this is difficult, but this is the real way to survive and live within God. And some people come early morning service, and when the business is doing well, they didn't have time to come to the early service because they were so busy. And he said that if I don't go there, it doesn't work. He says that even when I woke up in the early morning, he says he doesn't have the earning to go out and pray. And so he actually falls out of bed to wake himself up to go. And I'm not saying don't do it that way. And yeah, you're busy, and I realize that's not the thing. And when you come, that's great. But for us, when we want to do well before the Lord, and we really do want to do well in making money, but we need to live spiritually by doing. This is what we need to do. This is the life we need to do. And the reason why the church doesn't have power and authority is because of this. Because when we're in difficulty, we come to church. But when we don't, we don't even do anything at all. And we do all these things. However, when things are very well, and things are doing really, really well, we always come back and say, we have no authority at all. And that is why, the reason why Christians pray, not to do well, the reason why we Christians pray, it is because we don't trust ourselves. And because we don't want to do. When we're in peace, when we have the power, when we have the authority, we want to pray for God's will. We want to pray. And if you don't have you have those things, there's no church that actually seeks all that either. They're just seeking their own personal security and the storms and the people who want to have just peace. There's churches that do this, but really a church that really soars the authority and the power of God. I hope that in your life, it is not eating and drinking, but it is not money and power and knowledge, not that, but that you really seek the Lord in your life, and you really seek the protection in your life. And I bless you in Jesus' name. Let us all sing together.